If you're anything like me, you were born in the late 1900s, early 2000s.
The International Space Station crew welcomed its first visitors.
It's an online directory that connects people through universities and colleges.
All right. Thank you, Counsel.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
History obviously shapes our everyday lives from small to large. I like learning about history, but I am certainly not a historian. The last thing related to academics that I've done with history was in high school. I did go to college and get a degree, but that degree was in nothing close to history. You can take your guesses if you want. I do find the study of history very interesting, though. So because of that, I'd like to take a trip back 100 years with you, specifically 123 years. I want to go all the way back to the year 1900 and live this year with you. What would news have looked like? What was going on? What was important in America and throughout the rest of the world? Let's imagine we're hopping in a time machine and I'm going to be your guide, all the way back to the year 1900. The year 1900 is an exceptional common year. This means that it's divisible by 100 but not by 400. It starts on a Monday, January 1st. For a little bit of context, the US Census is published and has estimated the current population to be just under 70 million. For reference, the population in 2021 was recorded at 331.9 million. So what's been going on? Well, the Chinese Boxer Rebellion is starting to accelerate. The Boxer Rebellion is a Chinese nationalist movement that's going to take place in the next few years. The rebellion is a result of foreign influence in China and was sparked by the widespread anger and frustration with presence of foreign powers in China. This has weakened the Qin dynasty and increased poverty of the Chinese people. The rebellion is led by a secret society known as the Righteous and Harmonious Fists, or as we're going to call them, the Boxers, who are made up of young Chinese men who believe that their martial arts skills and spiritual practices give them the ability to fight against foreign armies. The Boxers are particularly opposed to the presence of Christian missionaries in China and the whole spread of Christianity. The Boxers will launch a series of attacks against foreign and foreign-owned property, and soon the rebellion will escalate into a full-scale war. January 1st will mark the first assassination of a foreign missionary, Reverend Brooke. Battles are also continuing in the Boer War. The Boer War, which is actually the Second Boer War, is a conflict that will be fought for another few years between the British Empire and the two Boer republics in South Africa, the South African Republic and the Orange Free State. The conflict was caused by tensions between the British and the Boers over control of rich gold and diamond mines in the region. We'll see this war having lasting impacts on Africa and the world as a whole. The war was a major confrontation between the British Empire and the Boer republics, made worse by the tensions and struggles over control and influence in the colonial world. The Boer War will be a significant event in the history of South Africa, as it'll lead the creation of the Union of South Africa, which we'll see happen in 1910. It's the first modern war to take place in Africa after seeing the introduction of the telegraph and wireless communication as a whole. This will change the way wars are fought and reported. It's one of the first wars to be covered by journalists and photographers whose photos you've been seeing. This is having a significant impact on the public opinion and the way wars are perceived by the general population. The Boer War is also seeing the introduction of the first concentration camps, which are used to detain Boer civilians, including women and children. The conditions in these camps are extremely harsh, and thousands will die as a result. It's January 6th, and William Vanderbilt has officially taken ownership of the Big Four railways. These are the four largest railroad companies in the U.S. We'll see these companies have a significant impact on the country's economic and industrial development. The Big Four are currently the backbone of American transportation and play a key role in connecting the country's east and west coasts. They facilitate the transportation of goods and people across the country and help spur the economy by connecting markets. In addition to their transportation functions, the Big Four railways also have significant political and economic power. They exert their influence over the federal government, and their owners and executives are the wealthiest and most influential people in the country. It's January 8th, and President William McKinley has just signed an executive order to increase the Navajo, Arizona territory size, extending it all the way to the Colorado River. This increase in Navajo territory provides them with more land for grazing their livestock, growing crops, and engaging in traditional activities, which helps support their traditional way of life. In addition to this cultural and economic benefit, the increase in Navajo territory is also significant in terms of national politics. It'll mark a turning point in the U.S. government's relationship with the Native American communities and demonstrate respecting the rights for Native Americans. I'm not saying here that the U.S. government has done everything they could for Native Americans, but this was a good step. President McKinley will also sign an executive order to place Alaska under military rule, creating the Department of Alaska within the War Department. The decision to place Alaska under military rule is driven by factors like the territory's security and stability, the need to enforce U.S. laws, and the desire to protect the interests of American citizens in the territory. It was also influenced by the U.S. government's broader policy towards territories at the time, which often involved the use of military force to maintain order. It's January 9th and the Boer War battles are continuing. Arthur Balfour, the Conservative leader of the House and Commons of the United Kingdom, is quoted as saying, "I know of no war in which Great Britain has engaged, except that resulting in the independence of the American colonies, which did not end triumphantly." Terry McGovern also defeats George Dixon in the World Featherweight Championship, winning $10,000. This is a few $100,000 today, but the Federal Reserve that we use for calculating inflation won't be founded for another 13 years, so it's a rough estimate. On the 28th, representatives from 86 football associations meet in Leipzig to organize the German Football Association. It's the 30th and William Goebel is shot. The Kentucky governor elections are highly contested this year and will mark a turning point in the state's politics. The election is fought between Democrat and Republican. There's been an intense partisan rivalry, and the election saw a significant voter turnout. The Republican candidate, William S. Taylor, has emerged as the victor, but the victory was immediately challenged by the Democratic candidate, William Goebel. The election was marred by allegations of fraud and misconduct, and both candidates claimed they had won. Taylor secured 2,383 more votes than Goebel, but many said those votes were invalid. The Democratic-controlled General Assembly, which was 10 Democrats, 1 Republican, convened and decided that they had the power to decide the disputed election. They examined the results and invalidated enough of Taylor's votes to declare Goebel the winner. The controversy surrounding the election has now ultimately led to a political crisis in Kentucky, with both candidates claiming governorship and each seeking control over the seat. However, Goebel's governorship is short-lived, as he will die on February 3rd. This will further escalate the crisis in Kentucky and lead to a series of legal battles and political maneuverings as various factions struggle for control over the state. On the 1st of February, the Kodak company releases its Brownie camera. This box-style camera changed photography for the masses. It cost $1, which is roughly equivalent to $30 in 2021. They were affordable enough that Kodak will go on to sell almost 250,000 of them over the next 2 years. On the 2nd, President McKinley is deciding not to interfere in the election issues in Kentucky. Quote, "The president has decided that no case has yet arisen to justify the intervention of the national government in Kentucky and has so informed the governor." It's the 3rd Abrisa Munda has been arrested in India. Munda is an indigenous leader in India who is leading a rebellion against British colonial rule. His rebellion is part of a larger movement of resistance by tribal communities in India against the British, who are attempting to extend their control over the country's interior regions. Munda organized a guerrilla army and has launched a series of raids and attacks on British colonial authorities and their allies, drawing attention to the injustices faced by tribal communities. His rebellion has gained widespread support and has become a symbol of resistance against colonial rule. Abrisa Munda's rebellion has recently been more suppressed. His capture and eventual execution later this year will mark an endpoint. However, his legacy will live on as a symbol of resistance. William Goebel has died from his gunshot wounds. He had been sworn in as governor, and because of this is the only state governor in U.S. history to be assassinated while in office. Later today, Goebel's lieutenant governor will be sworn in. While all of this is happening, William Taylor is still claiming that he had won the election and is now governor. Buenos Aires falls into its 2nd day of an extreme heat wave. So far, 124 lives have been lost due to sunstroke. Yesterday's temperature was recorded at 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. Now that Goebel has died, to try and prevent any further escalation, agreements have been made between Democratic and Republican Party leaders that the Kentucky legislators should decide who was the victor in the most recent election. This will hopefully bring peace to the parties for the time being. The Empress Dowager Cixi has issued an official order to stop the teachings of new, depraved, and the erroneous subjects of the Western schools. The Empress Dowager Cixi of China effectively controls the Chinese government and is pushing for the teachings of Confucius in schools as part of her larger effort to strengthen the traditional Chinese cultures and values. Confucianism is an important philosophical and ethical system in China, and its teachings are seen as central to the country's cultural and intellectual heritage. China is facing significant challenges right now: political instability, economic difficulties, and threats from foreign powers. Cixi believes that the revival of traditional culture and values, including Confucianism, is crucial for the stability and renewal of the country. British forces have suffered their heaviest daily loss during the Boer War, with 280 deaths. It's the 28th, and although one would usually expect February 29th tomorrow, the new Gregorian calendar does not include 1900 as a leap year. According to the rules of the Gregorian calendar, a leap year is a leap year if it's divisible by 4, but not if it's divisible by 100 unless it's also divisible by 400. Make sense? At the start of March here, as a graduate of Kansas State University, I need to mention that the University of Kansas, our competitor school, has suffered a basketball game loss to Nebraska 48-8. Truly a terrible performance. As President McKinley is traveling through the streets of New York City in his horse-drawn carriage, a drunken spectator attempts to open the door and shake his hand. This slightly dangerous moment will foreshadow some important events that will take place next year as it relates to the president's safety. The National League and American League of Baseball held a joint meeting today in New York City to discuss a potential merger. This is the first time the two leagues have come together to consider such a move. While the two sides ultimately did not agree to a merger, the meeting laid the groundwork for future negotiations and will lead to the establishment of the first World Series. The events were covered extensively in the press, with many newspapers speculating on the potential benefits and drawbacks of the merger. A merger would create a more competitive league and a larger pool of talented players, but many fans and journalists expressed their concerns that a merger could lead to higher ticket prices and a loss of the unique character of each league. This meeting mostly demonstrated the growing popularity of baseball in America, though. It was reported today that two Navy cruisers, the Detroit and the Marblehead, have been sent to Central America. The ships were sent to protect American citizens and interests in the region, which has become increasingly unstable in the recent years. This is part of a broader strategy by the United States to exert greater influence in Central and South America, a policy known as the Big Stick approach. While some critics argue that this is an unnecessary intervention in the affairs of other countries, others see it as necessary to protect Americans and ensure stability in the region. As tensions between the U.S. and other world powers continue to rise, the deployment of cruisers is a reminder of the importance of a strong military presence and strategic locations around the globe. Today, the Montreal Shamrocks played against the Halifax Crescents in the Stanley Cup Series. The Shamrocks won the game of a final score 11-0, a display of dominance on the ice. The Stanley Cup has been in existence for a few years and is quickly becoming the most prestigious trophy in North American ice hockey. The tournament is an important showcase of the sport and helps popularize it among fans across the continent. The game also established the Shamrocks as one of the top teams of the era. Queen Victoria visited London to celebrate the recent victory of Ladysmith in South Africa. The Queen's visit signals her support for the military efforts and helps to boost morale among the troops in the general public. It was a powerful symbol of unity and strength, and it helps galvanize the country in support of the war effort. The victory at Ladysmith is also an important moment in the Boer War, which has been raging since 1899. The town of Ladysmith has been under siege for several months, with British forces suffering heavy casualties and enduring difficult conditions. The victory comes as a relief to many, as it's seen as a sign of hope that the war could actually be a victory for the British. The Boer War has been a controversial conflict, with many in Britain and around the world opposing the imperialist ambitions of the empire. News broke that the Secretary of State, Caleb Powers, has been arrested on charges of conspiracy and murder in the assassination of Governor William Goebel in Kentucky. The assassination has been a highly controversial event and is being seen as entirely politically motivated. The arrest of a high-ranking government official like Secretary Powers only adds to the confusion and uncertainty that many Americans feel. While it's important for justice to be served in the case of Governor Goebel's murder, the arrest of Secretary Powers is a stark reminder of the fragility of our political institution and the dangers of corruption and the abuse of power. This case will continue to make the headlines for many months and have far-reaching implications for American politics. Today, Captain Umberto Cagni sets out on his expedition to the North Pole. The idea of reaching the northernmost point of the globe has long captivated the imaginations of many, and the fact that an Italian captain is now attempting it is a source of national pride and excitement. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a great time of interest for polar explorations. Nations around the world are competing to be the first to reach the North and South Poles. The challenges of polar explorations are immense. The extreme weather conditions, the terrain, the risk of starvation and illness. Despite these challenges, many explorers continue to push the boundaries of what's possible. They're driven by the spirit of adventure and the determination to succeed. For years, the pursuit of polar explorations will drive the innovation in fields of technology, aviation, and transportation. The expedition of Captain Cagni represents a high point in the history of exploration and a reminder of the bravery and perseverance for those who dare to venture into the unknown. The British forces capture Bloemfontein, the capital of the Orange Free State, which is a major Boer stronghold in the ongoing conflict. The capture of the city is a significant victory for the British and a major step forward in their campaign to bring the Boer War to an end. The fall of Bloemfontein leads to the dispersal of the Orange Free State government and further weakens the Boer forces. But the conflict will continue for another 2 years before it's finally resolved. The following day, on March 14th, the British forces enter the abandoned town of Kroonstad, which had been the Boer military headquarters in the Orange Free State. The town is left virtually intact as the Boers had fled before the British arrived. Nevertheless, the capture of Kroonstad is another important victory for the British as it puts them in a stronger position to win the war. The Orange Free State is one of the 2 Boer republics that existed in South Africa before the Boer War. Established in 1854, it's a small agrarian society that is largely dependent on the export of agricultural goods. Like its neighbor, the South African Republic, the Orange Free State has a predominantly Dutch-speaking white population. The United States also passes the Gold Standard Act, which establishes gold as the only standard for redeeming paper money in the United States. The Gold Standard Act was controversial, as some believed it would limit the government's ability to respond to economic crises and exacerbate income inequality. However, the supporters of the bill argued that the gold standard would promote financial stability and prevent inflation. The bill had already been passed in the House of Representatives, and its passing in the Senate was seen as a major victory for the pro-gold standard movement. The bill will soon be signed into law by President McKinley, making gold the sole basis for the United States monetary system for years to come. The scientific world is again changed by a paper by Dutch botanist Hugo de Vries. De Vries has been studying the process of inheritance in plants for years and is proposing a new theory that will challenge current ideas. He suggests that inherited traits are not blended like paint, but rather they are carried by discrete units that can be passed on intact from one generation to the next. De Vries believes they are responsible for the sudden appearance of new traits in a population. This is a radical departure from the dominant view that inherited traits are a result of blending the traits of the parents. De Vries' findings support the work of Gregor Mendel and his laws of heredity, which proposes that traits are inherited through the passing of discrete units, which we now call genes. De Vries' ideas are not immediately accepted, but they'll go on to have a major impact on the field of genetics. His work will inspire other scientists to study the nature of heredity in new ways, eventually leading to the discovery of DNA as a molecule responsible for carrying genetic information. De Vries' work is seen as a significant contribution to the field of genetics, and his paper sparks a renewed interest in Gregor Mendel's work. Scientists began to revisit Mendel's laws of heredity and use it as a framework for understanding inheritance traits, ultimately leading to the development of the modern science of genetics. News spread of the United States government's plans to send battleships to China. Ships like the USS Oregon and Nashville are being sent to help protect American interests in the country during this time of unrest. In recent years, several foreign powers, including Britain, France, and Germany, have established spheres of influence in China and imposed trade restrictions. This has led to tensions and conflict, especially as it relates to the Boxer Rebellion. Here, Chinese nationalists and the foreign powers are clashing. The deployment of the Oregon comes at a time when the United States is increasingly looking to expand its global influence. The country is still basking in the glow of the recent victory in the Spanish-American War, which saw the U.S. gain control over territories like Puerto Rico and the Philippines. The move to send the Oregon is seen by some as a continuation of this expansionist policy, aimed at securing U.S. interests abroad. The Topeka Daily Capital publishes its first edition of the Sheldon Edition, an experiment in journalism aimed at promoting Christian values. The edition is named after its editor, Reverend Charles Sheldon, who's known for his book In His Steps, which included the question, what would Jesus do? The experiment began on February 4th and aimed to test whether or not a newspaper that focused on Christian values could be successful. The Sheldon edition contained news stories, editorials, and other content that was consistent with the values expressed in Sheldon's book. Readers of the Sheldon edition found it to be an interesting and compelling read. They enjoyed articles that focused on the Christian's perspective and the newspaper's focus on positive values. As a result, the newspaper saw a significant increase in its circulation. Its typical circulation of 12,000 units increased to more than 350,000. The success of the Sheldon edition is significant in the context of American journalism, as it proves that readers are interested in content that promotes positive values and moral principles. Dr. Carl Landsteiner has just released his first report on the classification of the 4 blood groups under the ABO blood group system. This is a breakthrough in the field of medicine, as it has the potential to revolutionize the way blood transfusions are done. Landsteiner has discovered that there are 4 different blood types, A, B, AB, and O. He has found that these blood types are determined by the presence or absence of certain antigens on the surface of red blood cells. To make these discoveries, Landsteiner conducted a series of experiments in which he mixed the blood of different individuals and observed the reactions that occurred. He found that when blood from one individual was mixed with another individual of a different blood type, the blood would sometimes clot. Through these experiments, Landsteiner was able to determine that there are 4 different blood types and that each blood type has its own set of antigens and antibodies. Before this, there was no way to determine which blood type was compatible with the other, and blood transfusions were often fatal. With the new system of blood typing, doctors are now able to determine which blood types are compatible and which are not. Landsteiner's discoveries will go on to earn him the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1930. His work has laid the foundation for the modern practices of blood transfusion, and his discoveries will save countless lives. The U.S. Weather Bureau issues its first workplace smoking ban in Washington, D.C. This ban is the first of its kind and promotes a healthier work environment for employees. The ban comes after a series of studies that link smoking to various health issues, including lung cancer and heart disease. The Weather Bureau hopes this ban will set a precedent for other workplaces in the United States to follow. The ban is met with mixed reactions from the public. Some people praise the Weather Bureau for taking a stand against smoking and promoting healthier workplaces. Others criticize the ban as an infringement on personal freedom and an unnecessary regulation of individual behavior. Many smokers are upset that they can no longer enjoy their habit while on the job, and some even go as far to argue that the ban will decrease workplace productivity.
Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. This has been a bit of a passion project for me for about the last year. I wrote the script in the end of 2022 and have been working on and off on making this series since then. As you can tell by the title, it'll be 4 parts. This is the first out of the 4. The rest of the 4 will be the other months out of this year. If you enjoyed the video and are now here at the end, probably you should subscribe because you're going to like the others too. Leave a like, share with your friends as always. I do have a Patreon set up for this channel. Not that I expect anyone to give anything because this is a totally unproven set of videos that's coming out, but if you are thinking about doing that, then maybe head over there. These videos take a while to make. I would expect the next one to come up in a month maybe, but I just wanted to thank you so much for watching. Thanks for sharing, and I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.